Imagine the years 3000 BC. You're an average height 5'3" Neolithic European farmer, planting next year's barley harvest. You look up and an army of 5'10" warrior giants sitting on mounted beasts with giant heads ride up on your village. This is the story of how the Yamnaya, a group of terrifying warrior culture giants, spread throughout Eurasia. To say these guys were good at conquest is an understatement. They terrorized Eurasia for centuries with unfettered dominance to the point that today, they are the ancestors of nearly half of all modern Indo-Europeans and are responsible for increasing European height and introducing lactose tolerance to the European gene pool. The Yamnaya were nomadic steppe herders that existed between 3300 to 2500 BC in the Pontic-Caspian steppe, which encompasses modern-day Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania. They practice intricate pit burial rituals, which have provided us with substantial insight into their way of life and genetic makeup. In fact, their pit burial rituals were so universal throughout their civilization that the name we use for them today, Yamnaya, is inspired by the Russian word for describing pits. Their DNA is found in virtually all European, Middle Eastern, and to lesser degrees North African populations, though their expansion was not only confined westward, but also eastward, where we find the presence of their DNA in the populations of Siberia, the Indian subcontinent, and even Western China. So how'd they manage to take over all of Eurasia? Well, let's talk about it, brah. The Yamnaya people and their languages are one of the strongest candidates for being one of the earliest ancestors and dispersal mechanisms of the Proto-European language family. The typical phenotype among the Yamnaya population was brown eyes, brown hair, and intermediate skin color. Some minor groups of their population may have carried genes to express blonde hair and blue eyes. The most notable distinction about the Yamnaya was their size. These guys were huge. When excavating their burial sites, archaeologists almost always immediately recognize a Yamnaya site before even analyzing artifacts and DNA, just by looking at the pronounced size of the skeletal remains. The average male height was between the range of 5'7" to 5'11", and while that might not seem like much today, compared to Neolithic farmers who, depending on region, averaged between 5'1" to 5'5", the Yamnaya would have stood as giants during their era. This might be the modern equivalent of a new ethnic group popping up today, with LeBron James representing their average size male.
LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James.
A study in 2015 found that Yamnaya had the highest ever calculated genetic selection for human height of any ancient population. And it would make sense, as they were likely the earliest group to dominate the unforgiving environment of the central steppe region. With little cultivable lands, mountainous terrain, and bitter winters, they develop into a patriarchal, warlike culture where the strongest and largest men would procreate. With limited agricultural capabilities, they rely on a high-protein diet, which may have played a role in contributing to their enormous sizes. And like all their nomadic horse-riding descendants, without the ability to cultivate lands in a sedentary lifestyle, steppe culture revolves around constantly moving with the herd and pillaging resources from other groups along the way, nurturing an aggressive expansionist culture. The Yamnaya may have been some of the first humans to use the wheel, among other notable cultures like the Mesopotamians, as some of the oldest archaeological evidence of wheeled carts and wagons have been discovered at their sites, which likely further fueled their expansion as it allowed them to travel greater distances through being able to carry greater quantities of food and water over otherwise inhospitable lands. But what really put these guys on the map was an unimaginably powerful secret weapon: horses. The central steppe is the homeland of the modern domestic horse, and the Yamnaya were some of the earliest humans to domesticate and ride them. How we know they rode them, you ask? Excavated Yamnaya skeletons from 5,000 years ago show signs of stressors on their bones common among equestrians, indicative of the Yamnaya's prolonged time on horseback. So let's recap all the attributes of the Yamnaya. They had battle-hardened cultures built around expansionism and war. They were a head taller than everyone else and likely more muscular due to their high-protein diets. They could travel great distances because of their unlimited food and water supply on their wheeled contraptions. And to top things off, they are the only ones riding giant beasts into battle. No wonder they conquered the world. These guys were the definition of OP. The Yamnaya pillaged and slaughtered their way through Eurasia and contributed to local gene pools to varying degrees wherever they migrated, which was virtually everywhere. They basically wrote the playbook for the Mongols, but beat them to it by 4,000 years. It's notable that the presence of Yamnaya DNA in European populations is overwhelmingly of paternal lineage, meaning Yamnaya men were disproportionately quote-unquote marrying local populations' women. A 2015 study suggests that the Y chromosomes of the majority of European men can be traced back to just 3 individual Yamnaya men living between 3,500 and 7,300 years ago. This could mean one of two things. The Yamnaya men were taking all the women for themselves, or the more sinister case, they were massacring all other men on grand scales. Perhaps a combination of both. Today, up to 75% of Central and Eastern European populations carry Yamnaya DNA, with Finland having the highest contribution in the world at 50.4% of their gene pool. With their primary expansion seemingly westbound into Europe, where their DNA is most prevalent, the Yamnaya are believed to have significantly increased the average height of Europeans during the late Neolithic period. They likely also are the reason Europeans are lactose tolerant, or able to effectively digest dairy.
Couple of glasses of milk, lukewarm, skim for the lady.
Interestingly, there are 2 notable similarly cultured groups, among several others, that existed at opposite ends of the Yamnaya's territorial range, that are theorized to be the descendants of the Yamnaya. The first being the Afanasyevo to the east in the Altai Mountains of modern-day Mongolia, northwestern China, and Russia's southern Siberia. These guys were likely the direct descendants of the Yamnaya, given their similar material culture and nearly indistinguishable genetic makeup. The second is the corded ware culture in the West, in Central, Northern, and Western Europe. These people, while sharing extremely similar material culture to the Yamnaya, were previously widely believed to be the direct descendants of the Yamnaya as they expanded westward, much like the Afanasyevo to the east. However, lack of paternal DNA lineage to the Yamnaya has thrown a wrench in this theory, and many experts now theorize that the corded ware culture was perhaps complexly influenced genetically and culturally in varying paths, as opposed to the oversimplified theory of the unilinear expansion of a dominant Yamnaya culture. Whatever the case may be, the idea of the giant horse-riding warrior culture ravaging their way through Eurasia is a scary thought. But then again, most of us today are their descendants, so I guess we're the scary ones?